This conference will now be recorded.
Fine. Let me go and open the course content. Now, in yesterday's class, we started discussing about the Power Automate. In yesterday's class, we discussed about some introduction to what is this Power Automate. In yesterday's class, we discussed about some brief introduction to Power Automate. Now, in today's session, what we'll discuss here is we'll discuss about what is meant by a triggers, and also we'll discuss in today's session what is meant by an actions. So, first of all, what is this? What we'll understand now in today's session is we'll understand what is a trigger, what is the need of triggers, and next point we understand what are the different types of triggers we'll have in the Power Automate. And next we'll discuss about actions. Now, what is an action? What is the need of actions? And what the actions will contains? We'll be discussing them in today's session. So before going to discuss about to run the actual flows, before going to create the actual flows in the Power Automate, first of all, you need to have some knowledge on what is a trigger and what is an action. So in today's session, I will discuss about what is the trigger and what are the types of triggers we are having, and also we'll discuss about what is an action and what is the need of actions in Power Automate. And then after knowing these triggers and actions in today's session, from tomorrow onwards, we'll start discussing about how to go and create the flows. So let me go and open my notepad and let me keep here. In today's session, what we'll discuss here is we're going to discuss about the triggers and actions. Triggers and actions. Now try to understand, guys. So what is a trigger and what is an action? So first let me go and discuss about here what is meant by triggers. First let me go and discuss about what is a triggers. Now what is meant by trigger means, what the trigger is? Trigger is an event. Trigger is an event that starts a cloud flow. Trigger is an event that starts a cloud flow. Now try to understand, guys. Whenever if you want to start the cloud flows, whenever if you want to start the cloud flows, what the cloud flows will starts means trigger. So in the Power Automate, mainly we'll concentrate on what means, as I said that in yesterday's class, cloud flows. So whenever if you want to start a cloud flow, what the cloud flows will start means triggers will start the cloud flows. What is meant by a trigger means trigger is an event. So whenever if you want to start a flow, a cloud flow in the Power Automate, what the flows, what the cloud flows will starts means the cloud flows will starts with a trigger or will call it as an event. So let me go and keep here that point. The first step, triggers. Triggers is the first step. Trigger is the first step to start a flow. Trigger is the first step in a cloud flow. Let me keep it like this. Trigger is the first step in a cloud flow. So whenever if you want to go and start a cloud flow, what is the first step? What the flows will start means the flows will start with what? A trigger. What is a trigger? Event. So that's what I'm keeping here, guys. Trigger is the first step in a cloud flow. You'll understand what is this trigger, what is this event, how the flow is going to be started based on the triggers or event. You'll understand. I will explain you. For now, keep in mind what is the first step in the cloud flows means. The cloud flows will start with a trigger or we'll call it as an event. And next, we need to understand here types of triggers, guys. There are different types of triggers in the Power Automate, which will start a cloud flow. Now, what are the different types of triggers we'll have here is the first one is automated triggers. The first one is what? Automated triggers. And the second one is scheduled triggers. Scheduled triggers. And third one is instant triggers. So we know that what is a trigger? Trigger is the first step in the flow. So if you want to start a cloud flow, what the cloud flows will start? Triggers will start it. Trigger is an event. So what the types of triggers will have? The second point we'll understand here is we'll have the different types of triggers. What the different types of triggers we'll have here is first one is automated triggers, second one is scheduled triggers, and third one is instant triggers. Now what is this automated triggers? We need to understand. What is this scheduled triggers? We need to understand. And what is this instant triggers? We need to go and understand. First, let me go and discuss here. What is this automated triggers, guys? What is this automated triggers? What is the functionality of this automated triggers? Is automated triggers or automated triggers are used to automate the workflows. These are used to automate the workflows based on the based on the event that is based on the event that is performed on the data sources on the data sources. So what is this automated triggers means? Automated triggers are used to automate the workflows. If you have one company said that will have the workflows, if you want to automate the workflows, we need to go and use the power automate. So automated triggers are when to go and use this automated triggers means these are used to automate the workflows based on what? Based on the event that is performed on the data sources. So that means let me go and give one example here, guys. When to go and use this automated triggers? Let's say, let me give an example here. Let me go and keep here, guys. What is the example is when a record is inserted or updated, when a record is inserted or updated or delete, when a record is insert, update or delete in the data sources like what are the data sources? One of the data source we are using what? SharePoint. Data sources like SharePoint or SQL Server. So n number of data sources is there. So when a record is inserted, update or delete in the data sources, then need to perform an action here, guys, or need to, when a record is inserted, we need to send an email in the Outlook. You need to send an email in the Outlook. Now try to understand when to go and use this automated triggers means when a record is inserted, updated or deleted in the data source. Let us take the data source as a SharePoint. That means when a record is inserted, updated or deleted in the SharePoint list, then I need to go and need to send one email in the Outlook. I want to send an email in the Outlook. Let me go and give one scenario here, guys. Let us say I'm creating one app in the Power Apps. For whom I want to get means let's say I'm creating an app for the AB trainings itself, guys. Or let's say I'm creating an app for one of the institute where they are conducting some workshop. Whatever the app it is, let's take anyone. Let's take AB trainings. Already in the demo sessions I discussed about the creating an app for AB trainings, right? So let's say I'm creating an app for AB trainings. So in this app, I'm creating one form here, guys. So this app is for students inquiry. Whenever the student is inquired, I need to enter that student details in the app in form. So I'm having some fields here. In this app, there are some fields is there. Let's say student name is one field. Next field, second field is student mobile number. Second field is student mobile. Third one is student email. And next one is education, qualification, education. What is the education of that student? And another one more for which course the student is inquired. Like this, I'm able to create one form in the Power Apps. Let's say I'm creating one form here in the Power Apps for A/B trainings, which is used to enter the student's inquiry details. So this is the form I'm creating: student name, mobile number, email, what is education, and then for which course the student is inquired. Now, once after entering the student details, let's say I'm entering the student name, mobile number, email, what's education background and course. Once after entering the details, we'll have one button here, that is submit button. We know that once after entering the details, we need to go and submit that details. So to submit the details, I'm having one button here called submit button, guys. Once after entering the data in the app or in the form, when I go and click on the submit button, whatever the data I'm entering here, this data need to go and submit to where? This data need to go and submit to the data sources. So already we know that whenever if you go and click on the submit button, the data will go and store in where? Data sources. Now, what is the data source I'm taking here is, currently we are taking one of the data sources as SharePoint. Now try to understand, guys. Okay, I'm creating an app here. So whenever the new student is inquired, the front office team will enter that student details here: name, mobile number, email, education, course. Once after entering the details, they'll go and click on the submit button. Once they click on the submit button, whatever the data they are entering here, this data, that student details will come and store in where? In the data sources. Now, whenever the data is coming into the data sources means we are inserting one record or not? Yes. So if the data is submitting to the data sources means we are inserting one record there. So whenever the record is inserted into the data source, I said that when these automated triggers are going to be used, when a record is inserted in where? Data sources. When a record is inserted, once if I click on the submit button, the data will be inserted into the data sources. When now, once the data is inserted, that one will call it as one event, guess. Inserting the data into the SharePoint list is one event, or updating the data in the SharePoint list is another event. Deleting the data in the SharePoint list is one event. So insert is one event, update is one event, or delete is another event. So here, once I go and click on the submit button, the data is going to be submitted to the data sources. The data is submitting to the data sources means I'm inserting some data into the data source. So inserting that data is one event. So whenever the record is inserted, whenever the record is inserted, then it is going to trigger. Why? Because one event is happened. What event is happened? Inserting the record. It is inserting one new student details into the data source. So it is going to perform and it is going to trigger the data sources. Once the data is triggered, I need to, it is nothing but what? An event. An event is happening in the data source in the SharePoint list. So whenever the record is inserted, next what I want to do, so inserting the record is, I'm telling what? It's a trigger, or we'll call it as an event. One event is happening in the data source. Once the event is happened, what I need to do? Okay, the student details I'm entering in the Power Apps form. Once after entering the data, I will go and click on the submit button. Once I click on the submit button, the data will come in stored in the data sources. If the data is storing in the data sources means one event is happening. What event it is? Inserting the data is one event. Once the event is happened, then what it need to do? The flow will start. When I want to start the flow now, whenever the record is inserted in the data source, then I want to start the flow. What flow? So inserting the record is one event. Once the record is inserted, go and start the flow. What is my flow is? Let's say I want to run one flow. What is that flow I want to run here is, once the record is inserted, I want to send one email to that student. When I want to send the email to the student, which student details you are entering into the data source, to that student I want to send one email. What is that email? Thanks for inquiring AB trainings. So this is the course you are inquiring. We'll update you when the new batch is going to be started. This is the trainer details and this is the course details. And also, not only sending the email to the students, once the record is inserted into the SharePoint list, I want to send one email to the AB trainings owner. So who is the owner for this AB trainings? For them also I want to send one email. Why? Because they need to understand by the end of the day how many students are inquired. So I want to send another email to whom? Who is the owner for this AB trainings? So once the record is inserted into the data source, inserting the record is what? An event. Once the event is happened, whenever the record is inserted, then what I want to do? I want to run the flow. I said that when to go and use the automated triggers. Automated triggers are used to automate the workflows based on the event. So when I want to run the flow, what is my flow here is I want to send one email to the student, and also I want to send one email to the AB trainings owner. So when I want to send the email to the student and owner, whenever the new record is entered, whenever the new record is inserted, then I want to go and start the flow. So here, when the student will receive an email, when the owner will receive an email means whenever the record is inserted. When the record is inserted, then only go and run the flow. So what the flow it is, sending the emails to two persons. One is for student, second is for owner. So this is an automated trigger guys. So here I am running one flow. When I am running the flow, when the record is inserted, only go and run the flow. If the record is not inserted, no need to go and run the flow. So this is what is meant by an automated trigger guys. So automated trigger means once the record is inserted, I want to go and start the flow. In that flow, whatever the actions you want to take. Here, what is the action I am telling? Sending the email. Sending the emails is what? An action. Once the record is inserted, it is an event. Once the event is happened, what action you want to take? I want to send an email to the student, and I want to send a email to the owner of AB trainings. So what is an action, you will understand. For now, try to understand what is an event. Event is nothing but inserting the data, updating the data, or deleting the data. Once the record is inserted, what action you want to perform? Once the record is updated, what actions you want to do? If the record is deleted, what action you want to do? So I'll discuss about what is meant by actions. For now, try to understand what is a trigger. Trigger means insert, update, and delete. Once the record is inserted, what's the action we need to go and take? Once the record is updated, what actions we need to go and take? Once the record is deleted, what actions we need to go and take? So insert, update, and delete, these are called as what? Events. Event is nothing but what means? It is one trigger which is going to start the cloud flow. If you want to start the cloud flow, there are three ways. Three triggers will be there. One is automated. Automated means whenever something is happened in the data source, then only it is going to start the flow. So this is what is meant by automated triggers guys. And next, scheduled. Now when to go and use this scheduled? When to go and use this scheduled flows or scheduled triggers? Now try to understand guys. What is the use of the scheduled triggers means? Scheduled triggers are used to automate the workflows based on the date and time, based on the scheduled date and time intervals. Based on the scheduled date and time, I want to go and run the flow. Try to understand guys. What is this scheduled triggers means? When to go and use these scheduled triggers? These triggers are used to automate the workflows when based on the scheduled date and time. So what is the trigger here is? Previously, what is the trigger? When a record is insert, update, or delete, it is a trigger previously. But now what is my trigger? My trigger is date and time. Now let me give an example here guys. What is this? Examples for scheduled triggers. Let's say I want to send one email, or I want to send a report to my manager. Let's say I'm the team lead. Every day by the end of the day, every day at 6 p.m. At the end of the day, before leaving the office, I want to send one report to my manager. So what is the example for scheduled flows means? Send a report to the manager every day, every day at 6 p.m. Every day at 6 p.m. I want to send one report to my manager. So what is that report means? So let's say today, what is the progress of the project? Let's say we are working under one project. Today, how many tickets we resolved? What is the progress of that project when compared to yesterday and today? Today, how many members are working? So what is the status of that project for today? So I want to generate one report now. So I want to generate one report, what happened today, and I want to send that report to the manager at what time? Every day at 6 p.m. except Saturday and Sunday. Except Saturday and Sunday, remaining all the weekdays, Monday to Friday, every day at 6 p.m. I want to send the email. Now, every day at 6 p.m., maybe I will forget to send the email by 6 o'clock. So what I will do here is, Instead of going and sending the email to the manager manually, I want to do it automate. Every day I'm telling that the team lead wants to send the email to the manager report. What is that email means? One report they want to send. So if the team lead wants to send that report manually means maybe sometimes he will forget. So what I want to do, I want to go and automatically send the email or send the report to the manager every day at 6 p.m. I don't want to do it manually. I want to do it automatically. So what is the trigger here is, when I want to go and run the workflows is, at what time you want to run, at what date and time. Every day from Monday to Saturday at 6 p.m. I want to go and start the flow. Now what is the trigger here? The trigger is date and time. Every day Sunday to Monday, sorry, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. I want to go and run the flow. So previously the trigger is what? Whenever the record is insert, update or delete. But now what is the trigger? Date and time. At what date and time you want to run the flow? You can set the date and time here. Every day at 6 p.m. I want to run the flow. So what the flow will do, every day at 6 p.m. by 5 p.m. I will make ready the report case. By 5 p.m. I am ready with the report. I will keep that report in one folder. I will keep that report in one folder. So what, by 6 p.m. what the Power Automate will do? By 6 p.m. the trigger, 6 p.m. means the trigger will start. By 6 o'clock the trigger will activate. Once the trigger will activate, the flow will run. What the flow will do? Power Automate flow, it need to come to the folder, it need to take that report, and it need to send to whom? Manager. So this is the actions I want to do. What's the trigger here is? The trigger is time, date and time. So this is what the scheduled flows case. Another example for scheduled flows is, already I said that, right? Sending the birthday wishes to the employees. Sending the birthday wishes to the employees. Let's say in the organization 100 employees are working. Every day it is possible for the owner to go and check whose employees today and sending the email to that employees manually. No, it is somewhat difficult. Every day going and checking which employee birthday today and sending the email to that employee regarding birthday wishes. So what I want to do, I want to do this one also as automated. So what is the automation here is, every day every day at the morning 6 a.m. What is the trigger now? What's the trigger now? 6 a.m. Every day at 6 a.m. I want to run the flow. So what's my trigger here now? 6 a.m. is the trigger. Every day at 6 a.m. the trigger will activate. Once the trigger will activate, what the trigger will do? It will go and automate the workflow. What is my workflow here? So it need to go and check. There is one list in the employees list. What the Power Automate need to do? It need to go to that list. It need to check which employee date of birth is matching with today's date. If the employee date of birth is matching with today's date, then go and send one birthday wishes to that employees automatically. So here, what the trigger is? The trigger is at 6 a.m. every day. So this is the another example for scheduled triggers. And next, what is the one more? Instant triggers. Now what is this instant triggers? So what is this instant triggers means? Instant triggers are used to automate the workflows manually by tapping a button, manually by tapping a button by the users when it is required, or let me keep it as when it is needed. Users when it is needed. So what is this instant triggers means? I said that instant triggers are used to automate the workflows manually by tapping a button by the users. So whenever it is required. So I don't want to run the flow when the record is inserted, updated or deleted. Now I don't want to run the flow based on the scheduled date and time at 6 p.m. or 6 a.m. Now when I want to run the flow, whenever it is required, If I want to go and run, if I want to run it manually, whenever it is required, then only I want to run manually by tapping some button. So whenever if you want to automate the workflows manually by tapping a button by the users, when it is needed, whenever it is required, whenever it is needed for you to run that flow, then go and click on one button. At that time only the flow will run. Remaining cases, the flow doesn't run. So what is the example for this? Instant cloud flows means sending the uh, reminder notification to the employees. Let's say I'm the team lead. I'm conducting one meeting to the employees today at 7 p.m. So before 7 p.m., let's say at 10 minutes or 5 minutes before 7 p.m., I want to send one notification to all my employees, reminder notification. So by that time, they can understand. If I send one notification to them, so the employees can know that okay, next 5 to 10 minutes we'll have a meeting with that team lead. We need to be available for that meeting. So let me go and keep here. What is the example for this is send reminder notifications or messages case. Reminder messages or notifications to the team members. So example is whenever the meeting is happening, whenever if you are having one meeting as a team lead, I want to just send one notification to my team members, all the team members. Whenever I required, when I want to send before 5 minutes, before 10 minutes, or before 2 minutes, I want to send one notification to the users or my team members. So whenever I required, I can go and manually tap the button. Whenever it is required, I can go and click on one button. Once if I go and click on button, automatically the flow will run. So these are the three types of triggers will be there, guys. So first point, you need to understand what is a trigger. Trigger is an event that starts a cloud flow. Whenever if you want to start a cloud flow, you need to start with a trigger. So trigger is the first step in a cloud flow. Fine, we know that trigger is the first step to start a cloud flow. Now there are different types of triggers. There are different ways where you can start the flow. What the different triggers is? Automated, scheduled, and instant. When to go and use this automated means whenever an event is happened in the data source. Event means insert, update, or delete. Whenever the record is inserted, updated, or deleted in the data sources, at that time only I want to run the flow. So that type of running the flows will call it as what? Automated trigger. So automated triggers means automatically I want to run the flow whenever the event is happened. Event means insert, update, some actions. Some insert is one event, update is one event, delete is one event. And next one is what? Another type of trigger, scheduled. So now I want to run the flow based on the scheduled date and time. Now what is the trigger here is? The trigger is date and time. At what date and time you want to run the flow? So here I want to run the flow every day at what time? 6 p.m. So 6 p.m. is my trigger. So every day at 6 p.m. what the Power Automate will do? It will go and start one flow. What that flow will do? It will go to one folder and take one report and send that report to the manager. Another one more example is what? Scheduled flows. Every day at morning 6 a.m. I want to go to the SharePoint list, employees list. I want to check which employee date of birth is matching with today's date. If any employee date of birth is matching with today's date, go and send one birthday wishes to those employees. So here the trigger is what means? Here the trigger is date and time. At what date and time you want to run the flow. And next one is instant triggers. Instant triggers means whenever it is required for you, at that time only I want to run the flow. So whenever it is required at that time only if you want to run the flow, then we'll call it as a manually we'll run the flow. Manually, whenever it is required for us, we can go and click on one button, then automatically the flow will run. So these are the three different types of triggers will be there, guys. Either you can go and automate the flows with the help of automated triggers. Either you can go and run the flow with the help of scheduled triggers, or either you can go and run the flows with the help of instant triggers. So trigger is the first step to start a flow. Okay, fine. We know that what is a trigger. It is the first step to start a flow. Now I am telling that here one of the example. Whenever the record is inserted into the SharePoint list, let's say the record is inserted. Once the record is inserted, then automatically I want to start the process. I want to run the flow. So whenever the record is inserted, the trigger will activate. That means the flow will start. So once the record is inserted, that is a trigger, that is an event. Once the event is happened, what action you want to take now? Okay, the record is inserted. I'm creating one form in the SharePoint, in the Power Apps for A/B trainings. I given one example, right? I'm creating one app in the Power Apps to enter the student details. I'm entering the student details. I can go and click on the submit button. Once if I click on the submit button, that data will store in where? Data sources. Entering the data into the data source means what? Inserting the record. Insert the record is at, it is an event. So it is a trigger. So whenever the record is inserted, that flow need to start. The flow will start. Once the flow is started, now what actions you want to go and do? Within that flow, okay, the record is inserted. The flow will start. In that flow, what actions you want to do now? Once the record is inserted, let's say going and sending the emails to the student, going and giving one notification to the users or owners to that company. So this is called as a action. So once the event is happened, the flow will start. Once the flow will start, in that flow, what actions you want to do? So the second one we'll discuss here is what? Actions. Still now discussed about the triggers. So the next step is actions, guys. Now what is meant by action? Action is a task. Action is a task or operation, guys. Action is a task or operation that is performed, that is performed within the workflow, within the workflows or within the workflow when an when an event is activated, when an event is activated. So what I'm telling here, what is an action means? Action is a task. Action means it is a task or an operation that is performed within the workflow. When the action need to perform within the workflow means when an event is activated or triggered. When an event is activated. When an event is activated within the workflow, then what actions you want to take? So action is nothing but a task or an operation that is performed within the workflow when an event is activated. Let me go and give one example here, guys. Let me go and keep one example here. So whatever the example I given here, the same example previously. So here, when a record is inserted up or updated in the SharePoint list, whenever when a record is insert, update or delete in the SharePoint list, then the trigger will activate. Then the trigger will activate. Once the trigger will activate, once the trigger will activate, uh, the flow, or once the trigger will activate, the flow will perform, the flow will perform multiple actions, multiple actions. So now try to understand, guys. what what is this action means? Action is a task or an operation that is performed within the workflow when an event is activated. That means when a record is insert, update or delete in the SharePoint list, then the trigger will activate. Once the trigger will activate, the flow will perform. Once the trigger will activate, the flow will perform multiple actions within the workflow. So what is this multiple actions means? Sending the emails, sending the emails, or a notification, sending the notifications, sending the notifications in the teams, sending the notifications in the teams. Now try to understand, guys. So let me go and keep here. I'm having one app in the Power Apps. With the help of Power Apps, I'm creating one app. So as I said that already, I'm creating an app for whom? A/B trainings. So whenever the student is inquired, I want to enter the student details here. So I'm creating one form. So what's that form? Inquiry form, student name, student name. Second one is mobile number. Next one is email. And next, what is the education background? And next one is for which course the student is inquired. So I'm going to collect this information from the student. So I'm entering the student details here. Once after entering the student details, we'll have one button here, submit button. We'll go and click on the submit button. Now, once if I go and click on the submit button, automatically what happens? Whatever the data I'm entering here, that data will go and store in where? Data sources. As we know that the data will go and store in the data sources. Once the data comes, what is the data source I'm using here? SharePoint is my data source. Now, once the data comes into the data sources, so that is what I'm inserting one a record. I'm inserting one new students into the data source. Inserting the record into the data source is what? It is an event. It is an event. So whenever the event is happened in the data source, I need to go and perform some actions. When the record is inserted, that is an event. When the event is happened, so here guys, when record is inserted in the SharePoint list, then the trigger will activate. So when the trigger will activate, when an event is happened, what is the event? Inserting the data. So once the trigger is activated, once the trigger will activate, the flow will perform multiple actions, not a single action. The flow will perform the multiple actions like sending the emails, sending the notifications in the teams. So like this, based on our client requirement, we'll go and perform some multiple actions. So here, what is my action is, once the record is inserted, I want to go and send one email to the student, and also I want to go and send another email to whom? Let's say I want to send another email to the owner of the A/B trainings. Who is the owner for the A/B trainings? For him also, I want to go and send one email. This is the so and so student inquired for so and so course. This is the mobile number. This is the email ID of that student. So once after sending email to the student, and then the owner of the A/B trainings, and also I want to send one notification to the owner. Let's say in the WhatsApp or in the mobile text message, or I want to send one notification in the Teams. I want to send one notification to the owner in the Teams. So how many actions I am performing here? Sending the email to the student, sending the email to the owner, and also sending the one notification in the Teams to owner. So how many actions I'm performing here? 3 actions I'm performing. When I want to perform these 3 actions, whenever the data is inserted in the data source. Inserting the data is nothing but what? Event. Whenever the event is happened in the data source, what event? Inserting the record, then I need to go and perform how many actions? 3 actions. So this is what is meant by an action, guys. So trigger is meant which is used to start the flow. When you want to start the flow, when you want to start the flow when a record is inserted, or you want to start the flow based on the date and time, or if you want to start the flow manually by tapping a button. So there are 3 types of triggers is there when you want to start the flow. So once the flow will start based on the trigger, then that flow need to perform some actions. Actions means sending the emails to the student, sending the email to the owner, and sending one notification in the Teams for that particular owner. So these are the actions. Once if a workflow will contains only one trigger, but it contains multiple actions. Once the flow will start, in that flow, multiple actions will be there. When the flow will start, based on the trigger. What type of trigger? It depends on your requirement. Whether it is automated trigger, whether it is a scheduled trigger, or whether it is a instant triggers. So this is what about what is meant by triggers and what is meant by actions. And one more point here, how many actions a flow will contains means already I kept that point here. Let me go and keep it again. A flow a flow will contains a flow will contains multiple actions which can be performed which can be performed when an event is when an event is triggered. So how many actions a flow contains means a flow will contains multiple actions which can be performed when an event is triggered. When an event is triggered, then the flow will have multiple actions. Based on the client requirement, we can go and define the multiple actions here. So this is all about what is meant by a trigger and what is meant by action. So why I'm discussing this point here is, if you want to start the flow, first of all you need to start the flow with what? Trigger. If you want to start the flow, you need to go and have what first? A trigger you need to have. So you need to understand what's meant by a trigger, what are the different types of triggers we are having. Once the flow will start with the help of trigger, next what the flow will contains means actions. So actions is nothing but what? Sending the emails, sending the notifications, sending the message in the teams, getting the approvals, sending the emails to manager and HR. So multiple actions you are able to perform. That's what I'm keeping here. A flow will contains multiple actions which can be performed when the event is triggered. When the multiple actions will be performed, once the event is triggered, then only go and perform the actions. So that's what I'm keeping here clearly in this example. When a record is inserted, updated or deleted in the SharePoint list, then the trigger will activate. Once the trigger will activate, the flow will perform multiple actions like sending the emails and sending the notifications in the teams. For now, you are able to understand these two, easy to understand. So what type of different actions you are able to perform, you will be understanding in the coming classes. Fine. So this is all about what is meant by triggers and actions. From tomorrow, I'll start discussing about the flows. So in the tomorrow's class, we'll discuss about some introduction to UI and then start discussing about how to go and create some simple flows in the Power Automate. Let me go and stop here today. Now let's go to the questions. Online people, if you have any questions, please unmute and go ahead.